Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to episode 92 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorDNA.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is Magdalene Visaggio. You might know her work from comics such as Kim and Kim, Quantum Teens Are Go, and that really awesome Superman story in last year's Cursed Comics Calvacade. She's writing a new series due out in March for Oni Press called Morning in America. I got a look at the first issue, and it is pretty awesome. What I like most about this conversation is Magdalene's perspective on the 80s. Morning in America is set in 1983, so there's a nostalgia factor in there, but she brings a really interesting viewpoint to it that really explains a whole generation's current fascination with that decade. It's great stuff. Morning in America #1 is due out on March 6th. In other news, since the site has changed, my email address has as well. If you want to get in touch with me about your horror comic, please do so at james@horrordna.com. Now, without further ado, let's get into episode 92 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Magdalene Visaggio. So, to start us off, if you had to explain Morning in America to someone, like an elevator pitch or something like that, how would you pitch the book to somebody?
It's about like a failing Rust Belt town in the early 80s where there's a spate of child disappearances. And this like a gang of sort of no-account teen girl delinquents sort of discover that the cops aren't actually investigating the disappearances, so they decide that they're gonna.
Great. I like the way you described it. What was it? Teen girl delinquents?
Yeah.
Yeah. They make for a pretty interesting group of characters. I read the first issue, and it's you can't help but like immediately get on their side. Like they're like kind of like the rebellious kids, but they're ones that you want to hang out with. They're like the ones you wish you were friends with in high school.
Yeah, basically that was kind of the idea. Is sort of the I wanted them to be sort of the friends I kind of always wished I had.
I mean, are they based on any?
I was
sorry, go ahead.
I was such a loser. I didn't have cool friends like them.
I don't think anyone did. That's the thing. Like, I think we all watched, like, TV shows and stuff like that growing up, and you're thinking, like, man, I really wanted friends like, Pete and Pete and stuff like that, or Clarissa from Clarissa Explains It All, but, like, no one ever knew anyone like that. Like, no one was ever that cool.
Yeah, probably not. But we all want to dream.
Yeah. Well, is there any basis on real people or character archetypes, I guess, things like that from in the characters in Morning in America?
I gave Nancy a lot of like my family's experience with sort of like economic dislocation. Like I was pretty poor growing up, and my dad always seemed to be jumping from job to job to job to job, and I kind of drew from that experience and the strain that put on my family. But sort of beyond that, I tried to draw the girls mostly pretty broadly with kind of like movie archetypes.
Okay, like any movies in particular, or more like just like in general, like here's the nerd girl, here's the cool girl.
Yeah, I mean the cool girl, but like she's like Ellen's not just a cool girl, she's kind of Mean Girls, she's got that kind of attitude and Ashley's like the cute naive one, and Nancy's your protagonist, so she's the sensible one because you've got to be on her side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's and like I said, like I said, it's easy to kind of relate to these characters already, like in seeing them, and I think you even have nice little introductions to them when we first meet them in terms of like kind of if you had to quickly sum them up as people, but they're described more as their crimes or misdemeanors, I guess.
Yeah, they're rap sheets.
That's the word I was looking for. I get a real like kind of Stephen King vibe from this. And Stephen King tends to be like every other person's kind of introduction to the horror genre. It mainly because in terms of it seems like this is like a real world scenario, real world people. Are real world characters that suddenly get confronted with something that is something out of the ordinary, like supernatural or paranormal or something like that. Is that any sort of like influence on the book at all, or am I just reading too much into it?
No, that's totally appropriate. I love Stephen King. I started working on this before Stranger Things was around, and it was a little bit less of a trope at this point. But like I had just been on this big King binge for a few months at that point, and I was just like, I love the way he draws these very full character portraits in every one of his books. Like all of the characters are so hugely realized. Even like the characters you only meet here or there are like tantalizingly tangible. Everything about them, from the settings to their names to their complex web relationships and backstories. I'm absolutely in awe of King's ability to draw humans that well. And so I wanted to try to tackle something that, pardon me, something that felt to me the way King feels to me. To try to, give it that kind of grounded realism. And then throw everyone into the shit pile.
Yeah, I think you definitely get that vibe. It is that fully realized characters. Like I said, it was so easy just to be like, all right, yeah, we're along for this ride. Whatever these kids want to do, I'm down. So if they're like, yeah, fuck the police, let's go fight these cops, or do what the cops are unable to do, then yes, we're along to that ride. There's no respecting the authority in this measure. They clearly need help.
Yeah, and I have such amazing affection for these kids. It was a real blast spending that time with them, getting to know Nancy, especially, and Nancy's growth over the course of that book is something that I am particularly proud of. Her ability to articulate things to herself that she's not good at articulating. She's kind of like this little ball of repressed anger that she doesn't know how to express. And that's kind of the reason why she is the way she is. And sort of the whole thing that happens has this, backdrop of Nancy's growth in terms of being able to process her complicated feelings. That was just a really thrilling thing to be able to do, and that's more than anything is what feels Kingian to me about the book, in terms of its relationship to that source material, is the direct through line of Nancy's emotional path.
Yeah, I think that definitely comes through in the book. It's it feels almost silly to say that sometimes, where it's oh well, is Stephen King an inspiration? Yeah, I mean, I feel like every other person that's ever read a horror book or seen a horror movie, yes, of course, Stephen King is in some way, shape, or form influencing that work. But there's that certain kind of tone that comes forth in it, and you capture that with it, and it's not like it comes across as oh, this is just another Stephen King story. And I didn't. I hear you what you said about Stranger Things, and I don't necessarily get that kind of I guess similarity too much with it. I wouldn't put the two Morning in America and Stranger Things in the same kind of bucket overall. There's different kind of a vibe to it. I feel like I'm saying that word too many times, but that's the kind of thing that I'm going for. But I guess when you're looking at this and knowing that we now exist in a post Stranger Things world, is there any, I guess, issues with the fact that it's all right, you have a book that's you have a Stephen King-esque thing in the 80s. Are there any because I talked to someone else once before where they had a similar idea, not similar idea, but something that was kind of set in the 80s, that kind of vibe and stuff, and then it was they were a little almost resentful of the fact that okay, everyone's gonna kind of compare them to Stranger Things now.
Yeah, but I think ideas are cheap, and anything I make isn't going to be Stranger Things because I'm not the Duffer Brothers.
You're also one person. Yeah, you're not a whole team of writers and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I think that there's anything that you make is going to be the thing that you make and not the thing someone else makes. So, if you're taking it seriously, if you're not aping Stranger Things, and it's your take on that scene, on what that communicates to you, and on how that resonates with you. So I didn't grow up with that media the way the Duffer Brothers did because I'm 10 years younger than them. And, like, that's not really what I grew up in. So for me, that doesn't evoke the nostalgia of my childhood as much as that's, like, primal stuff that predates me. That's, like, prehistory to me. And so for me, mining that means something very different. If that makes sense.
I mean, well, could you speak a little bit about what that means to you, knowing that you're kind of coming at it from a different angle?
Well, I mean, I was just kind of winging that as I was talking. I think it wasn't a thought that I brought to the conversation in advance.
That's okay.
But I think it probably holds true. But like, I didn't grow up, you know, in a world that was saturated by you know, like E.T. and the Goonies and stuff. That wasn't what I grew up watching. You know, I grew up watching Home Alone and Dunstan Checks In. You know, like that was my mediascape. And so all those were old movies. That wasn't stuff. I've still never seen the first Gremlins movie. You know, like that's just like not. Mm-hmm. That wasn't my world. And so to me, that's all stuff that like was always like lurking in the background of culture. To me, I'm exploring territory that's not familiar to me.
Yeah,
So I'm kind of walking around in awe, like, holy crap, it's so weird. What must it have been like to live like this?
Yeah.
For me, that's the thing, is like, for me, it's not memory. For me, like, I was born in 1984. I cannot remember anything before 1989. You know? I missed the 80s. I'm aware Nelson exists. You know? Like, that's my experience. And so to me, this is all like, this is the stuff that was there when I showed up. This is the stuff that's always like the weird experiences of my older cousins.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, I'm an 84 kid too, and for somehow, like, Ghostbusters is a great example of, like, that existed. That came out the same year I was born, but, like, I was infatuated with the Ghostbusters, and, like, my 5th birthday party, my 5th birthday party was held at a firehouse. And it was a Ghostbusters themed birthday party. And like, looking back at it, I'm like, how the hell did I know about this movie when I was 5 years old? Like, that's probably it, because that came out like a few years after, but like,
that's what I was into, was the cartoon.
It's just amazing, like, to think about how much I loved that movie and watched that movie at way too young of an age. Like, that, like, all the jokes like went over my head, and then yet it stuck with me so much that now when I watch it as an adult and I get all the jokes, and now I have like I have like multiple levels of appreciation for the movie and the franchise as a whole. But yeah, it's all these things like that in the 80s that were everywhere.
It's like Ghostbusters, Ninja Turtles, are those like Voltron, are these things that existed when I was born, things that like were just around as part of the texture of the universe. And they're not something I have these like, I mean, I really like Ninja Turtles. I grew up on Ninja Turtles, but I don't have like a deep, passionate relationship with Ninja Turtles because it wasn't formative for me at an age when I could internalize it in a big way. You know, I was just too young when it was big.
Yeah, and even like we were kind of in the sunset of some of that stuff. Yeah, so like, we didn't get like the Ninja Turtles weren't for the comics or even like the very, very early cartoons. It was like the live action movie. And then like the weird cartoons.
Yeah, so this is all like stuff that's on the fringes of my experience. And so I don't think Born Again America is going to have the same kind of nostalgia vibe because I don't have nostalgia for that era. To me, that's half of the mystery. That's half of what makes something like 80s movies work for me is on this level in which they feel timeless. That's just like the default state of the universe to me. It's not like an era I remember. It's bigger than me. It's cosmic. It's primal. It's root. And so for me, that's something I think is really interesting to explore, is all that stuff that was just there when I was born. The world that shaped me that I never knew is something that fascinates me. So I actually have a couple of things that are set in the 80s kind of precisely for that reason, because I'm really obsessed with that stuff, because it's all over media, and I can't ever have that nostalgic relationship to it. For me, it's always just, I'm discovering this new thing.
That's an excellent point, and like a really really great way to look at it. Like, I haven't heard it phrased quite that way. Like, cause I feel like all the 80s stuff has come back because I feel like, you know, the people that grew up on that are now in positions of power in things like publishers and movie studios and things like that, which is why we have things like the Transformers movies and G.I. Joe movies and all this other nonsense out there. But, like, exploring it the way that you're describing is really interesting because it's like an era that you kind of, like, you were around for, but you weren't totally around, or maybe you were just, you know, just on just past its, like, the big apex of it, but just, like, it was always part of the cultural zeitgeist, and it's something that it's probably more interesting than whatever came out in the, you know, the 50s, 60s, or 70s, because of how close you were to it. And yeah, I can see how that's, like, so interesting to explore.
Yeah, like, for me, half the fun of watching old, like 80s commercials and stuff is just being like, holy crap, that was a world that existed, that there's this level in which I participated in it, that I only vaguely remember. Years and years and years ago, I was talking with a friend of mine, and he just randomly says to me, do you remember, he's like, you're like a media nerd. Do you remember if there was a show where, like, there was a kid who was half alien and had, like, powers to make time stop? Did I make that up? And I'm just sitting there and I blink. Yeah. I'm just sitting there and I blink, and the words "out of this world" come out of my mouth. And I'm like, I don't know where I know that from. I don't know how I know that, but I think it was called "Out of This World." And then we pull it up on YouTube and watch the opening, and I'm just, like, stunned. Because I remember in brilliant detail, it was like this thing when I was, like, 3. This, that's what I'm saying, like, these primal, these, you know, in at birth sensations and memories of this world that had a very specific, like, sensorial texture to it in terms of its aesthetics, its colors, its smells, was passing away as I was a child, you know?
That, I lived
and it's just weird, it's weird to me because to learn what these things were, to verify that they existed, that these experiences that I have were, like, genuine participations in a world, is something that's, I feel like I'm rambling, but this is how I think I'm insane.
It's such a great way to look at not only the stuff that comes in the 80s, but just, like, that, like, whatever came before you were born, it just, like, it has, like, yeah, you can read about it in books, but, like, there's no way for you to directly experience that. And the way that you're kind of diving into it with your comics is like an interesting kind of window to it. So it's a way for you to almost experience it firsthand, without actually being there. So, like, it's great. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I think there's a level that's super accurate, and that's kind of how I think about it. Experiencing without having to have been there. I also think that, just interestingly enough, I think my generation is probably the first crop of, like, writers who don't remember the 80s. You know? And so I feel like any of us tackling the 80s is gonna be tackling something, you know, from, like, the culture that predates us. Nothing we experienced, just how things were when we got here. And so I think there's definitely going to be just a different way to think about it. There's not reverence. There's fascination.
That is very well said.
Like, for me, yeah.
Not reverence, fascination.
I guess that's really kind of what I've been getting, what I'm kind of trying to get at, is it's fascination. It's like, holy shit, I kind of vaguely remember this being a thing. And I'm amazed to, like, see it. It's not just the weird little nugget of information in my head, but the whole fully realized thing. Like, for me, going back and watching, like, the opening to Dinosaurs or Barbie and the Rockers kind of does that for me. It's like, this thing that I have the vaguest possible memories of does exist and cannot be experienced again, but can be experienced kind of for the first time.
Yeah, and really. It's almost like thinking...
Because you only have these little...
Yeah, and you're
memories
thinking,
of it.
like this happened in my lifetime, and somewhere like in the farthest reaches of your mind, you remember, like out of this world. It's like I don't remember experience. I can't like point to a specific instance or like tell you about an episode, but the core facets of it is something that like it's back there in like buried in the corners of my mind, but it happened. It's there.
Yeah, for me, that fucking, what the fuck was that show? What the fuck was that game show that Colin Quinn hosted? Where if you got an answer wrong, your chair threw you into a fire zone?
Remote Control?
Remote fucking Control. Like, that's one of those shows for me. I don't know why that popped into my head, but like, that's like the show that's just like, was just around and a part of the universe as far as I'm concerned. It's fundamental to things like gravity.
Like You Can't Do That on Television. Like, that was a show, like, I remember it existing, I remember pieces of it, but like, it happened like just before I have any of those formative memories. Nickelodeon to me was like Rugrats, or no, before that was like Hey Dude and Salute Your Shorts and stuff. Then it was Rugrats and stuff like that.
Yeah, early Nickelodeon is where my brain clicked on, but I have a few memories of what it was like before then.
That's crazy.
And it's just, yeah, so for me, Murdering in America is, I'm not trying to recreate my experiences of it. I'm just being like, I wanted something that makes me feel the way a Stephen King book feels.
I
want to try to like touch that world that's so close to familiar.
That's beautiful. Like, I love it. Like, if people are listening to this and don't immediately want to just pre-order this book, like, I don't know what else to tell you, because like that is such a well said way to come at this. That's perfect. On the Stephen King front,
well,
like, you said you were like binge reading a bunch of books. Like, what were you kind of digging into when you're going through a whole bunch of his library?
Needful Things and It, which I hadn't read before. This was like 3 years ago that I started thinking about this. Was it 3 years? Can't have been that long. Oh, it doesn't matter. Needful Things, It, Pet Sematary, Carrie again.
Do you have a favorite?
What else? From a viewing. Well, for the longest time, my favorite was The Stand, and now I'm genuinely torn between It and Needful Things.
I don't know that I've ever read Needful Things.
Those two were
I haven't
stellar.
read Needful Things yet. I don't think
Needful Things is great. Is a great book in ways that like I didn't really know what to expect going in, because it's the standard, like devil sells, like things that like it's kind of like the ironic, like the cursed thing. It's like, here's a magnifying glass that will, shrink you,
like a monkey's paw kind of thing.
But this is all like these intricately placed dominoes that then all go over at once, and it just goes to shit, and it's magical. It is a magical book to experience. It's one of my favorite.
All right,
Stephen King
I'm gonna
books.
move it up on the to read pile then, and read it much sooner than I had anticipated.
So Morning in America definitely has closer ties to something like It, and just things like The Goonies, and to like those kid adventures. Like I was actually a really big fan of Explorers growing up. So it's definitely got closer ties to that. But I think I tried to give it some of the paranoia of Needful Things. Like the whole sense of, the police are in on it. This is a thing that's being done, not a thing that's happening.
There's like a conspiracy vibe there, where it's like, we don't know exactly what's going on, but we know whatever it is that's wrong, and we have to do something about it. The kids are the only ones that are going to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
Love it.
So I feel like I'm trying to sort of bring the two worlds together.
Yeah, no, I think you get in that. And I like that the first issue kind of establishes the world, but it doesn't give too much away. It's more than enough to kind of pull you in and be like, yes, I need to know more about this. I need to see what this is up against. But like, you're not going to like see like a giant monster come out or something like that, like out of the blue. I think there's only like one real shot that like kind of teases at what something could be. And it's like such an ominous thing, and it's like your mind is filling in the blank. I want to be cognizant of like spoilers and stuff like that, but you get more of the tone than.
It's on the first
Sorry, go ahead.
It's on the first page.
So all right, so it's not spoiling too much.
I mean, yeah, it's on the first page. You can give that one away.
But that kind of like look of like, I don't know what this is, but like it's more than enough to kind of like to hook you there. That kind of air of mystery is pretty cool. I like that. It's.
I hope we maintain that. I have tried to keep things mysterious for the reader, to sort of make sure that they don't really know that much more than the Six Sisters do. Hopefully I've maintained that.
I think that there's like a growing trend now in horror specifically where like they're kind of trusting the reader or the viewer a lot more than perhaps other genres are, where it's like, yeah, okay, we don't have to tell you every single little detail of this character's origin or their thought process or their history. You could kind of just get enough to go to move the story along, and that's all you need. What we're focused on is the character development and like the story beats and stuff like that, and that ends up being it's like you have to be like at least this smart to ride this ride, and that's okay. Like, the readers are smart. They could, for the most part, could pick up these kind of things, and I think we're seeing that a lot more lately.
Yeah, for me, my focus is always on the emotional arc. I sort of don't have a huge problem with letting things go unresolved if I don't think it's something that would matter to the characters if it was resolved, And so I mean, I'm all about like keeping cards covered if I don't think anyone needs to see them, because I think space is at such a premium in comics that I think you really get down to the bone.
Yeah, there shouldn't be all that much like fat on a comic book page. It's like a lot of everything should be working together to move that story along, and you don't really have the benefit of like taking a long pause or something like that. You could do that to some extent of like kind of repeating panels and things like that, but it ends up being when you drag something out, it can be like, okay, like what really happened in this issue, and people get frustrated in that regard. Yep. So I guess I don't want to talk too much about like the design of what these things are, but in working with the artists on the book, like how did you come about with the designs for the characters, and was that something like, did you have certain things in mind, and you kind of gave it to it was Claudia, right? To kind of
Claudia mostly did the designs by herself. I'm generally a pretty big believer in letting the artist do what they want to do, because it's theirs. That's right. Their part of this. I told the story I wanted to tell. I let them figure out the visuals for it. Me and Claudia, though, are really close, and I think we were all very on the same page. So what I tend to do is I'll write out like what I call a character sketch. Usually about a paragraph, between 1 and 3 paragraphs about a person. And it's generally not about what their appearance is. I'll just talk about what kind of person they are. I'll think through their motivations, character relationships, stuff like that. And I hand that document off to the artist and then say, who do you think these people are? And so with the Six Sisters, we did 2 rounds of design, and it was mostly just because we actually got notes back from Oni about the characters, and so we just kind of decided to update to basically like they were worried their wardrobes felt out of date, which was kind of the point. We were going for a Peggy Girl kind of vibe, but they were like, this might be like a little confusing. Can we just like dress them like it's the 80s? And so then we went through a few rounds to figure out what kind of dressers would they be. But that was kind of mostly it. Claudia is an extraordinarily talented character designer, and I think she landed the spirit for each one of these characters almost immediately.
Yeah, you get a good sense of who they are based on their appearance with that, and I think with like the kind of archetypes that you mentioned before, so that definitely comes through.
Yeah. So that was all kind of. That's just Claudia's talent at, visual storytelling. She knows how to get point across. She's a very efficient artist, which is a very high compliment.
That's great. And it sounds like you guys have a great working relationship there too. So that's, it's important to work with people that you like.
We call each other comic wives. So we're going to be working together until we die.
Till death do you part. That's good.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Shifting gears just a little, I really loved your story in the DC Comics Cursed Comics Calvacade this year. Like, it was one that really stood out, because it showed, I feel like sometimes it can be tough to do a Superman story, but yours was it brought up the human side of him. In this kind of way of even this guy who's tough as nails could have nightmares and could be terrified about stuff because they're real world things that he can't punch. He can't punch a nightmare. It's just something that can get into his head, and it was really creepy in that regard, which is kind of the point of that whole book. But that was a really cool story. So I just wanted to one, compliment you on that, but two, it seems like you've been bouncing around with some of the between the big two publishers with stuff like that, and I think you had done some work on Marvel as well. Are there areas like that you want to kind of continue to explore?
Whoa, okay, that was a lot of questions. What do you mean? Are there areas I'd like to explore?
The stupid question is would you like to write more superhero work? Or yes.
Obviously, I have dream pitches. I would kill to write anything in the Superman or Spider family. I have a Daredevil back pocket pitch. I have a She-Hulk back pocket pitch. I would love to write Spider-Girl.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone has a couple of those in their pocket, and it's ready to go in any moment. Yeah. So yeah, apologies, that was a dumb question, but I was kind of spinning out of the Cursed Comics Calvacade thing because it popped up because that's one of my top books for top horror comics for the year was that one, which that list should go up tomorrow. But yeah, getting it in right at the last minute there, but that was definitely a highlight of the year for me. I feel like superheroes are can be so close to horror, and it's something that I kind of struggle with sometimes because you see some of the things that these characters come across on a daily basis. I mean, just looking at Batman's rogues gallery, for example, is like half of those are literal monsters, but it's still kind of through the guise of capes and tights and things like that. So I feel like it's so close to the genre that we could be seeing so much more, and we're not yet. So as a frustrated horror fan, it's something that I want to see done so much more.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely room for that. I mean, I think horror superheroes are a thing we've had in the past, and I don't see the reason why we don't have any. I mean, it's possible there's just not proving to be a market for it. But I find that a little hard to believe just because of how much territory comics tends to cover. Mm-hmm. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, there's always room. I feel like the comics in general has so much space for literally everything. So I shouldn't be too greedy in that there's still literally at least 30 horror comics published every week. So I don't know why I'm yeah, but why can't Spider-Man also be terrifying? I guess I'm getting too greedy in that regard.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, I think the Halloween thing was just kind of a fun one-off, and it was a really interesting and challenging opportunity because it's how do you scare the invulnerable man? And so I spent this evening hanging out with a friend of mine, just kind of hashing out what are the things that bother him, what are the things that keep Superman up at night, what are the things that keep him awake, what are the things he can't control, and that it all comes down to things you can't control. And so sleep paralysis really presented itself as a very natural way to put him in a position where he would genuinely be afraid, because here's a problem he can't, he can't punch. I'm glad that it worked. It was a really challenging script to put together.
Yeah, no, it came through well, and I think that's the second year in a row now that DC's done that kind of horror anthology. So I'm hoping that becomes a yearly tradition with them, because it's something that
As far as I know, they've already got one
Great.
going for next year.
I'm
So
so happy to hear that.
not hard. They do these. They've been doing these quarterly anthologies, these like seasonal things, and I believe they've got a spring one already scheduled.
They had done like a Monsters in Love one, I think, last year too. So I'm all for it. These kind of things, like it helps tell new and interesting stories, and hopefully open the door for other stuff that we might not have seen before. So I'm all for it.
Yeah.
All right. So I've run out of stuff to ask you, but this has been a really fun chat. I think in looking up the at least the previews catalog, it looks like Morning in America's schedule. The first issue is due out on March 6th. That line up with you.
Correct.
So like I said, I've had a chance to look at the first issue, and it's really cool stuff. Like as we've been talking about. So it sounds like if you're an 80s kid or an almost 80s kid, or a Stephen King fan, you'll have something to enjoy with this comic. So definitely look out for that. We'll have links to pre-order the book in the show notes as well. But aside from that, where are the best places to find you online?
Twitter, I'm at Mags Visaggs. That's MAGSVISAGGS.
All right, that about does it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest Magdalene Visaggio. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorDNA.com. We have been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. If you like the show, please help me out by leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. I am always looking for new guests, so if you have a horror comic, I want to hear from you. I don't care if you're a seasoned pro or a first-timer. You could find me on Twitter as @JamesFerguson or via email at james@horrordna.com. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and so much more. Check us out at HorrorDNA.com and at HorrorDNA on Twitter.